Well, Geek, we have made it back for yet another season finale of Sherlock. Today we'll be discussing the season 3 finale of Sherlock entitled His Last Vow. What were your initial thoughts of this season 3 finale when you first saw it?
I loved it, really loved it. Watching it back, I've got some thoughts that I'm not going to get into specifically at the start of this review. I'll get into it later on, but yeah, really good villain, really good setup. Sort of, when you think about it, it's like the Marvel villains, where the villain always has like the hero's powers.
The overall villain in this final episode of Sherlock season 3, and I think that the director and the writer of this episode, Stephen Moffat, he did a really good job at conveying how much of a control that this character had over the British government. I mean, for the first scene, he's basically threatening this woman by being the most grotesque individual you've ever seen. And as I'm watching this scene, I'm like, what is it with this guy? Is he like sick or something? Because the way that he's treating this woman is completely detestable. But as the episode goes on, you understand that this guy has basically blackmail over everybody with influence in the English government. He can act like that because he has all sorts of blackmail. The woman that he threatens at the beginning of the episode is driving home, and she says, you know what, somebody needs to put this guy in his place. And so she tells her driver to turn around and head to, Baker Street to hire Sherlock. And the really cool thing that I thought this episode did that last episode didn't do is that I thought the storytelling in this episode was much more tight and it made more sense. There's a woman that comes to Sherlock's flat to talk to Sherlock, but John is the only one there. And she says, my son is in this cracked den somewhere in London. And John takes it upon himself to go get his, this woman's son. And everybody thinks Sherlock is, on drugs again, that he's taking heroin or that he's smoking, right? So I really like how that little thing tied up to the main plot of this episode with Sherlock stopping this guy who has these really cool sort of VR glasses that reads the information of people. Like he sees like stats. He's very, very calm, cool, and methodical. So I thought that he was a great villain for Sherlock to face in the season finale of season 3.
Yeah, do you not think though he should have appeared in like episode 1 to build the character up? That was my main criticism of. I mean, they done it with Moriarty in the end of the first episode in the first season, and they don't even mention this guy's name, and then he's this big, huge thing, and everyone's supposed to know who he is. So that was my main criticism: is I want more of him, and they should have. Maybe not had him interacting with Sherlock, but had him in meetings, and you progressively see him get a bit more evil, or you find out a bit more what this guy's about.
Like, if I knew that this guy was the main villain for season 3, I would have had him teased in the first 2 episodes. But I've really come to understand that these episodes of Sherlock are constructed in such a way where we might not get a main series villain teased in previous episodes before we see him, except for Moriarty. So I don't particularly like the way that Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss has handled villains. So it wasn't surprising to me that they didn't tease this sort of ace that they had in their pocket early on in the season. Although if I was writing this season, I would have done that from the start.
Yeah, definitely. So even have Sherlock walks into a room and Watson's watching the news and he's watching something about this guy, or there's a newspaper, just something, because he's a great actor, he's a great villain, it's a great episode, and we're clearly going to get to talk about the ending, and the ending is we're never going to see this guy again, basically.
I found this episode to be, from a story's perspective, I found it to be much more in line with, a good episode of Doctor Who, right? Setup, conflict, and resolution. Because the last episode, as you guys know, and as my cohort Geek here also displayed some feelings, last episode was very, very all over the place. So I really liked how simple and purposeful this episode was. But the thing that I loved about this episode is that this episode finally addressed something that I've been teasing in our reviews, and that is the reveal of Mary, and that she is basically a hit woman that has been forced to do some things because this individual that Sherlock is facing off with in this episode has some dirt on her and knows who she really is and knows who many people she's killed and knows who she really works for. And the thing that really, really drove it home for me was when she shot Sherlock. And I love that scene in particular because when she shoots Sherlock, the camera tilts and watches Sherlock fall in slow motion. And once he falls in slow motion, you see Sherlock go in his mind palace and run through all the scenarios about how to survive this incident. And that leads to a magnificent reveal of Mary to John in like this old building. And it's just fantastic storytelling in my point of view, because I've never seen that done before with Mary's character in any kind of Sherlock ever. So that really made me happy.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of everyone being part of the action in a story, and by that I mean we've spoken about this before. I don't think we've done it on this show, but the Flash, everyone gets superpowers in the Flash as soon as they introduce a new character, and not just the Flash but the Arrowverse as well. It's like they introduce a new character, that actor or that character becomes popular, and then they give them powers to keep them about. And yeah, I don't hate what they done with Mary. I liked it, and what I said in the last episode, there's something about these three characters or these three actors together that works for me. But I think there's just something missing as well. And it was good for a season finale, and it was good because, you know, you've got to shake John and his character, because Sherlock doesn't have those personal relationships with people outside of John. But yeah, not the massive fan of it.
What were some of your favorite moments from this episode? Did anything stand out to you in particular?
I love the villain because of just his entire demeanour. He never raises his voice. He never changes the pace or the tone in which he talks. It's just, okay, this is what we're going to do, or this is what I want you to do. This is what's going to happen next, and so on and so forth.
It's not like somebody, it's not like James Moriarty that would go from zero to 60 in like a second. There's a scene in this episode where Sherlock postulates that this gentleman's power is in his spectacles, and when he takes off his glasses, this villain still has that power. So do you think that, because initially I thought that maybe this guy had like some implants in his eyes or something, and I was like, that's a little bit too much, science fiction for Sherlock. But as we go along, we find out that this guy has like this fortress, right, where he keeps all of his blackmail material. And the fascinating thing is that when this guy invites John and Sherlock to his fortress to find all his blackmail material, he leads John and Sherlock to this white room. And here's the kicker. Here's where I said, bravo, this is one of the best episodes of Sherlock that we've seen so far. Is this guy says, the thing that you're looking for is in my mind palace. Every piece of blackmail that I have is in my head. So I was like, wow, that is awesome. He's like an anti-Sherlock. What did you think about that?
Yeah, amazing. Like I said a moment ago, it's like the Marvel villains, that they've got the same powers as the hero, and you don't... Well, I mean, once you've seen the episode, you see it coming for the second time, but for the first time, it's absolutely brilliant, and it's the fact that it never occurs to Sherlock that someone else can do what I can do. And you said it perfectly at the start of the recording about the way that this guy talks to people. It's because he's got absolute power, and it's because he's a sociopath. He's got no emotion behind what he's saying.
I think what sets Sherlock apart from him is that Sherlock is a high-functioning sociopath, but he's a high-functioning sociopath with emotions. So that's why I believe why Sherlock does what he does. Because, he figures out that there's no way to beat this guy, right? So let's talk about the sort of shocking ending where Sherlock makes a choice that basically gets him exiled from London that leads to a ridiculous twist that I have no idea how they're going to do. I don't remember. What did you think about the shocking final scene of this episode, and what do you think about how Sherlock ends up beating this individual?
I remember when I watched it for the first time, vividly thinking he's not going to shoot him because it's Benedict Cumberbatch, it's the BBC, it's, if you live in the UK, you know what I mean, it's like an 8 PM BBC show, it's totally safe, there's going to be no swearing or sex or violence, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, I didn't see that coming. And then as soon as it happens and he doesn't run, you're instantly like, well, what's going to happen next? I mean, yeah, it threw me at the time, definitely, because you don't expect that. And I think that was probably definitely 100% Stephen Moffat and not Mark Gatiss.
I would think at this late in the game, Mark Gatiss and to more in effect, Stephen Moffat knew that they needed something big and something with some shock value to go into their final season of the show. Now, as someone who was there when the show was airing, did they know at this time that they were going to have a final season, or were they not sure about that?
I think at the time it was up in the air because Martin Freeman, I'm sure, had already filmed The Hobbits. I don't know if The Hobbits film has come out. And Cumberbatch was really taken off, so I think it was like, we might get these guys back, but it's going to cost us a fortune.
Sherlock ends up getting exiled. John forgives Mary for her digressions in an amazing emotional scene at Mycroft's and Sherlock's parents' house, which I thought was great. Because the betrayal from John, from Mary, was played very, very well by Martin Freeman in this episode. You could really feel the sense of betrayal. But the thing that I liked about that quite a bit is that Sherlock points out that John is attracted to these kind of individuals. So it makes sense that John would attract an individual or individuals with skeletons in their closet. So I really, really like that aspect of this episode as well. It's something really, really small, but I thought this episode in particular, more than most episodes that we've seen on Sherlock, was constructed very, very well and plotted very, very well.
A good episode of Sherlock sort of has these bam, 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 snappy moments and then gives you a little bit of time to breathe. Certainly the last episode that we watched didn't have that. It just felt like it was all playing at the one speed. But yeah, it's always good when the villain sort of pulls the rabbit out of a hat, or pulls like a big red button and says, I'm going to push this and something's going to happen. And it completely delivers for me. That Magnussen was a great villain, and I wish we got to see more of him.
Now we're going to get to the part where I called bullshit.
Right.
And no matter what they do, it's not going to make sense. He was teased while Sherlock was, trying to save himself. So I'm not going to bury the lead, but somehow Moriarty is alive, and the episode ends with a post-credit scene saying, have you missed me, or something like that. And I was like, really, guys? Is this what we're doing for the final season? We can't, I'm like, how? Because for those of you who don't remember, Moriarty blew his head off. So how in the living hell are they going to explain their way out of this one? With some reworking, I could have seen how this episode could have been a series finale for the entire show. It felt like an end. I don't know where we're headed. I don't know how the show is going to end, although I do know that I'm probably going to be pissed at the ending, because I do have some recollection of a lot of Sherlock fans not liking the way that this series ultimately ended up. But besides that point, I am not ready for the bullshit that they're going to feed me by trying to explain how in the hell Moriarty is back. It's like a Emperor Palpatine bullshit kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we've got one more episode before that. We've got the Christmas special.
When you were watching the season finale back in the day and that final moment came up with Moriarty back on the screen, what the hell were you thinking?
Yeah, exactly what you were saying there of like, how the hell are they going to do this? But looking back now, I think it is clear that they did realise that Andrew Scott was a great actor and a fan favourite, so they could have maybe kept Magnussen around. I don't know if that was ever floated, but I think to keep the fans interested rather than introduce a new villain, they just wanted to bring back an old one, which I understand, but also at the same time it does feel lazy.
I have, much appreciation for Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat, especially Stephen Moffat from his Doctor Who days. But I don't know how the fuck they're gonna explain this, and I am fascinated to see what they're gonna do. What are you looking forward to as we are going downhill, and as we are sort of gonna wrap up Sherlock, in the next little while here? First starting with the special, and then dealing with the final season of the show.
I'm looking forward to watching the final season because I don't remember much about the first. I remember one thing about the first episode, but I can't talk about it because it will spoil it. I don't remember anything about the second, and I think I've only seen the Christmas special once, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it jogs the memories and stuff, and seeing how the show's aged, because watching it back, you just think that again, TV wasn't where it was when Sherlock started, Game of Thrones and everything changed, all that. So you look back and you just think there's so many missed opportunities, or they could have gone deeper into things or leaned harder in a certain direction and they never done it. But again, it was a prime time BBC show.
I'm just, I'm really looking forward to the special that we have coming up next. But ultimately, I'm really looking forward to how the final, season of Sherlock is going to play out. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll do it for this discussion on Sherlock Season 3. Before we go, if the good folks at home want to find you, Geek, and talk to you about Sherlock or anything else having to do with pop culture, what would be the best place for them to find you?
Best place to reach me is on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. It's all the one word, or my own YouTube channel. If you just type in Geek in Review in YouTube search bar, it should pop up.
If you want to find me and anything that I do on the interwebs, the best place to find me is also on Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to click on our faces, to hear our thoughts on Sherlock. Until next time, as always, guys, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.